To Syria now, where rebel forces were responsible for a civilian massacre in August. That's according to a report by Human Rights Watch. The US-based NGO carried out its own fact-finding mission in the war zone. And according to the watchdog, an opposition offensive killed nearly 200 villagers living in pro-Assad communities. The report calls the atrocity a coordinated attack, suggesting it was premeditated. Based on the scale of the offensive, the findings conclude that the massacre was systematic and part of a concrete policy. It strongly suggests that crimes against humanity were committed and calls on the international community to bring the perpetrators to account. Well, let's now talk to Joe Stork. He's acting Middle East Director at Human Rights Watch. Now, if, as your report says, this was a premeditated and planned attack, who would have been behind it and what were their motives?
I can't really speak to their motives. We have identified we know that about 20 different groups took part, 20 different opposition groups, but we identified 5 of those groups, 5 of them by name, that were primarily responsible for organizing the attack, for raising the funds for the attack, and then for carrying out these particular atrocities that we document.
You talk about atrocities. What are you exactly talking about here? What happened to those people?
We're talking about really cold-blooded killings of, as you noted, some 200 people. All of them, the ones that we identified, not being combatants, not being fighters on the government side, women, children, elderly people, people who, you know, there was absolutely no military excuse, military reason why they should have been killed the way they were.
You say that 20 groups were involved in this. How easy will it, or I should say, how difficult will it be to bring the culprits to account?
Well, I think the primary issue here in bringing the culprits to account is it's high time, I think, for the UN Security Council, and that means with Russia's cooperation and support, to refer the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court. I mean, it's quite clear that there's no capacity in Syria to hold these people accountable. So we have to be talking about, you know, an international dimension.
All right, talking of international dimension here, Joe, I know that in your report you're saying that Kuwait and Gulf states were, or are indeed responsible for arming these militias.
No, we didn't say that. We did not say that.
What did you say then?
We said that individuals who are citizens of Kuwait and primarily Kuwait among the Gulf states are known to be funders and supporters of some of these groups.
We know that Gulf states are...
Sorry, excuse me, let me finish. Let me finish. We did not say, we found no evidence that any other government, like Kuwait or any other government, was actually providing support. So that's an important distinction. Some of the individuals are not even living in Kuwait. So
right.
Let's be careful.
Yes, sure. Thanks for making that clear to us. Now, what sort of reaction, though, do you expect to get, though, from the international community, bearing in mind that so many are saying that Assad and his government are responsible for atrocities, and now this report emerges? What sort of impact could it have?
That's right. We're looking at a situation where all sides to this conflict have been responsible for atrocities. Certainly opposition elements. And I don't want to here paint a broad brush and say the opposition. We're talking about 5 groups, distinct groups, who were responsible for these atrocities. And yes, we've identified in past reports crimes by government forces and by pro-government forces. Just a few weeks ago, we put out a report about a massacre in the village of al-qaeda, also on Latakia coast. In which government forces were responsible for similar kinds of atrocities. So clearly there's a need for a situation like the International Criminal Court was set up, not to look just at one side, to look impartially at crimes committed by all parties.
And just briefly, it was Alawite people, the pro-Assad people who were targeted here. Is that indicative of what their future holds if Assad goes?
I think clearly there's a vicious sectarian element to the conflict in Syria today. And yes, these attacks that we documented in this report certainly reflect that. I think the responsibility for that sectarian polarization lies heavily with the government of Syria, with Assad's government. But clearly there are elements in the opposition, including these particular groups, that are also fomenting precisely this kind of sectarian hatred.
Joe Stork, Acting Middle East Director at Human Rights Watch, thank you very much indeed for joining us live here on RT. Really interesting to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.